proper Christian view of religious freedom. I'm Matthew Vishaw. The related topics of toleration, separation of church and state, liberty of conscience, freedom of speech have been widely discussed and promoted in certain quarters. We need to take a view of these issues from a biblical and spiritual foundation to guide us to pragmatic resolutions. Usually, these views are taken from the basis of principles of libertarianism versus authoritarianism. And if they are taken from a perspective pro a particular religion, those people usually argue for a libertarian-style approach because they're afraid that authoritarianism, or a form of it, might be wielded against them. This means that a libertarian, of one sort or another, can be ambivalent about religious practice, or else, perhaps, a libertarian pro-religionist will wish to promote and proselytize with their particular religion, but without restriction, thinking that general toleration is a kind of a privilege. We are taking an approach from the view of a specific form of Christianity, and from this, we can identify differences between this view and that, or those, of libertarianism. Those who say liberty are thinking that liberty must be defined and declared by people through documents, that the state ultimately safeguards the uninhibited practice of religion, and that practitioners of one sort or one form of religion should support this liberty because they would not wish their own religion being singled out or banned. Our approach is one based on true freedom, which states that one particular belief system is objectively true, and that this particular movement has divine backing, and is therefore practicing in such a way to the ultimate exclusion, overtaking, and defeat of all contrary belief systems. So these two approaches are simply this. One is a human-based liberty rights adhered to out of maybe fear, arrogance, or spiritual ignorance, or else there's a scriptural divine commandment adhered to out of faith, humility, and spiritual knowledge. Because we are touching on this topic from a biblical and spiritual foundation to guide us to pragmatic resolutions, we're not viewing this topic neutrally, but viewing it from the point of Christian authority and fundamentally rejecting any philosophical declaration of human-derived rights. Our foundation document is the Bible. The Old Testament is very clear that only one religion, the religion of Jehovah, usually called the law, is true. The New Testament is likewise very clear that Christianity, as the spiritual advancement of the law, is the only true religion. 2 Corinthians chapter 4 verse 6 says, "For God, who commanded the light to shine out of darkness, hath shined in our hearts, to give the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ." The light of truth came from God, a God who pre-existed creation, a God who is communicating to people today, and truth is absolute. It's an objective reality. The Christian emperors, from Constantine to Theodosius, proclaimed that Christianity was the only true religion, superior to paganism. Christianity became the state religion. Protestantism proclaimed that Christianity was the only true religion, superior to other forms of Christianity, such as Catholicism and Orthodoxy. And Protestantism was the state religion of England. However, even though the Anglican Church was settled and in uniformity, it cannot be denied that there was dissent. Puritans, sects of them, so there had to be toleration for various kinds of Protestants, but true Protestants would still agree on a variety of basic doctrines. The progress toward a true articulation within English-speaking Protestantism was also occurring. There was a rise in both biblical and in the spirit. This means that truth is recoverable and a perfect form attainable. Just as Christianity overcame paganism, with Constantine, and just as Christianity overcame Romanism with the ongoing English Reformation, so likewise infidelity with its atheism, modernism, communism, political correctness, liberal theology, evolution, unbelief, ecumenism, etc., is to be defeated. Back in papal times, the Roman Catholics were intolerant of Protestants and any dissent. Hence the Inquisition, their war on other philosophies like Freemasonry, etc. Roman Catholicism was so repugnant that the French Revolution targeted it. The French Revolution came from the ideas of the Enlightenment. It was based on the thoughts of infidelity. The French, and afterwards the United Nations, declared the universal rights of man. Infidels like Voltaire and others declared freedom of religion. Freethinkers and radicals said that my own mind is my own church. The French then asserted the right of the state over religion. Instead of rights coming from divine authority, men decided to grant rights to themselves. These rights included stipulated natural rights and human rights, which were either based on an ethical code of infidelity or else by actual statements made by universal rights of man, etc. documents, as were done by both the French Revolution and from the United Nations. Instead of the universal teachings of Christianity with absolute good and evil, modernism introduced subjectivism, no God, no certainty, no rigid truth. The French Revolution took a long time to reach inside America and England, but when it came, it brought social upheaval and all kinds of problems as seen in the 1960s. Going beyond modernism leads to postmodernism, where literally there is no boundary but that which is allowed by infidelity. All beliefs, such as old Catholicism, Islam, believing Christianity, and the like, are essentially the enemy. The ideology of nothingness and self-centeredness and love of money therefore outweighs any established, rigid, and particular religion. Rebellion and anti-authoritarianism are marks of affected Protestant Christianity. Protestants everywhere, to some degree or other, both within their religion and theology and in their lives outside church activities, have been highly affected by infidelity. The power of infidelity is such that Christianity has seemingly faltered. Christians who try to evangelize have had very low effectiveness, and the very knowledge and standards of Christian doctrine have plummeted, shockingly. Many Protestants have believed that things are getting worse, and that Christ would come back to rescue the church, and so they've become defeatist and retreated into the enclaves and spend their time talking like that Antichrist is just about on the scene and ready to take over, and therefore have consoled themselves with entertainment into a stupor. Some thought that this was wrong, and instead have taken matters in hand to a more natural view. They have assumed almost that Christ is not coming, and so that Christians have to act for themselves, and they got involved in programs and politics and other methods to stop the tide of darkness. But when all around is that socially progressive agenda which is triumphing, and political correctness is shoved down people's throats, and Christianity is, worse and worse, apparently, with numbers dropping, and then various so-called bright sparks, they've talked about being wise. And what they mean is we've got to become more like the world and embrace worldliness to present ourselves as, like them. See, that's defeatism, and that's unfortunately been embraced by even some politicians and certainly by many church leaders. And at the same time, they've talked about human rights being used to protect Christian practice. They call this religious liberty, and they've espoused human rights of freedom and religion. These are Christian people. These are Pentecostals. See, they're afraid of the failure of Christianity into the future, and maybe they're afraid of the empowerment of various minorities against Christianity. And they've thought, those same rights that have been given to those minorities should be granted to Christians to help protect them. But these rights, they're not biblically based. They're not from the Spirit of God. They're not from the Bible. No, they're from the world, and the world has used them. See, this represents the very strategy of the devil. You see, after everyone has been given the rights to kick Christianity, how stupid would it be then that Christians should think that they should be granted these rights from the same source for its protection? Rights for religion, rights for religious freedom, or any such concept actually is sort of based on a lie. Christianity requires no protection or granted stipulations from any source. Why? Because it's self-evidently true in itself. If it is right, it will not fail. So, Christianity, and one particular form of Protestantism, being true, is to be vindicated, and it is, and this by the chain of providence and by the inevitable work of the hand of God through history, and manifestly by divine intervention, so confirming it. It is only on this basis that we can see how a nation like Australia should, or shouldn't, legislate in a practical sense. The Australian Constitution, for example, says that it has no hold over religion. And this is implied by the fact that the state has acted against witchcraft, communism, and terrorism. So authority exists and is necessary for the ordering of society for individual betterment, but Christianity is able, both on an individual level and on a national level, to reach a kind of a perfection. There's an open environment for Christianity to triumph over its enemies. There shouldn't be complete license. No, rather, there should be the field and opportunity for Christianity to, in the conflict of ideas, be able to defeat opposing ideas. And the correct approach is that things are happening in line with the triumphing of true Christianity through time. Why? Because true Christianity has been true all along. God's got a plan. So therefore, it would be wrong for good Christians, say, whether they're Presbyterians or Pentecostals, whatever, to say that, oh, well, we shouldn't have an established religion or a state religion. You see, the establishment of religion is of greater power than the state. And this establishment does not need to be derived from the state. Establishing religion or authority is not the problem. The only wrong problem is wrong religion. Misguided principles are the problem. So it is significantly wrong for certain, let's say, Pentecostals to join alongside with and say the same thing as, say, Roman Catholic politicians or enemy left-wing charity activist organisations and libertarian agnostics in calling for, a Religious Rights Act in Australia. If any pastor says that it is wise to use the arguments of the world to make this case, based on documents of infidelity like UN declarations, in order to somehow reach the world, then basically what they're saying is, it's good to use Satan's system. It's tantamount to saying that serving Antichrist is right. Isaiah 31 verse 1 says, "Woe to them that go down to Egypt for help, and stay on horses, and trust in chariots, because they are many, and in horsemen, because they are very strong. But they look not unto the Holy One of Israel, neither seek the Lord."